Good morning on this Friday morning, and a crazy week that's absolutely surprised everybody, probably, when you consider some of the movement that we've seen within the marketplace. We've talked about how volatile and the acceleration and the velocity and all of that, and that really has been the truth, including today. But before we jump to today, I'll just get a real quick recap of yesterday. Markets absolutely were rocketing to the upside yesterday. We had that great move to the upside, and even in the pre-markets, there was a triple-digit move. So we just extended and just continued to the upside as volatility has been very, very volatile. And I say that it may sound funny, but it's true, because the fact that we started out around 22.5, we jumped up to 29. I'm talking about this week, and then pulled all the way back towards this 22.5 level once again. So a lot of different movements, some individual names. Obviously, Walgreens Boots yesterday had an absolutely spectacular day, talking about a strategic deal as well. So that was a stock that was leading the markets to the upside. Tesla, of course, Elon Musk now becoming the richest man in the world, and everybody excited about that as Tesla jumped well over $800 a share yesterday. Semiconductors were on fire once again, and we've talked about this time and time again, and how much unusual option activity we've seen in so many different names. But I'll give you AMD and Micron and Marvell and NVIDIA and Xilinx and all of these names that have been hitting for months and months and months. And, people talk about these pullbacks. We've had very, very shallow pullbacks in the semiconductors and mostly just new highs. As a matter of fact, today, another new high. We'll talk about that in one more second. But financials, the rocketing move in the financials, as well as we watch the 10-year push towards that 1% and holding a little bit over that 1% level. So Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan and all these names, and we've talked about the XLF. And yesterday I talked about seeing option paper in the XLF and then shifting, just because I'm less intrigued to trade ETFs, to some of the bigger names. So in the case of the financials, that was JP Morgan. And I'm pretty pleased about how that's gone. And that's something that if you don't understand it, just take a look at what's within each one of these ETFs that's out there. And if you see the weightings, and the weightings are much heavier for certain names, that can give you a little bit of a insight into how you may want to approach it if you're like me and you're not as interested in trading the ETFs. If you are, great. But we've seen a lot of activity across many of the ETFs, including, I'm going to give you an unusual, and here's a little hint, I'm going to give you unusual. And today, I'm actually going to hit an ETF. So that'll be interesting, because as much as I dislike doing it, I think that there's reasons why I think some of those names need to be pointed out, in particular, in this case, the ETF. So today, started out strong. We're up about 100 points on the Dow, about 80 points on the NASDAQ early on. We kicked off to close out this week, and suddenly we open, we're only up about 50, up about 70 on the NASDAQ. Then we start to slip a little bit, but the NASDAQ continues to extend a little bit higher, up in triple digits. Then, just before I came on here, the last I looked, we had the NASDAQ only up about 35 points, and we were looking at the Dow that was getting pressed down pretty significantly, down about 70 points, significantly relative to where we had actually started out and some of the push. So again, just playing into what we've seen play out throughout this past week, which is a lot of movement, some velocity for sure. Crude getting back over 51, now over 51.5. You got the 10-year still holding that 1% level. VIX still in those low 20s, call it 22, somewhere between 22, 22.5. So a lot of that just sort of playing out as we go into the weekend. And by the way, traders across the board, and I put this out on social media earlier today, but I'll tell you what, traders right now are focusing on next week. And what are they focusing on? They're focusing on earnings. They're focusing on the banks, the big banks, because that's the kickoff next week. So just be aware of that and keep an eye on that. And obviously, we've seen a pretty nice run out of that. We were talking about XLF just a second ago, and JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs and a lot of these various names as they've had this incredible run up. So we had some relatively negative news early that didn't seem to have much of an effect, but now we're seeing a little bit of an effect in terms of the markets on a pretty sharp move from where they had catapulted higher. But we're talking about job creation. That looks like it was slowing. Unemployment, that looked like it was rising. So that combination you would think would have been a little bit negative, and that news was out there early. So we didn't really react, at least immediately, to that, but now we've started to see a little bit of selling pressure. So what are some of the movers today? Tesla, once again, F5. Thermo Fisher, Micron, Marvell, semiconductors across the board just rocketing. And as I said, some new highs there. We had energy starting off pretty nice. I mentioned the 51.5 level. We have Chevron and Exxon definitely having some nice performance, especially out of Chevron today. What's lower? Well, financials were taking a little bit of a breather after a run to the upside. Semiconductors continue to be strong. Yesterday, we had that NVIDIA paper as well. And we also had Taiwan Semi again, and some large trading in there. So the semiconductors remain strong, and that's part of what we're seeing in terms of the NASDAQ, as we see other parts of the NASDAQ maybe getting a little bit softer, maybe a little bit, at least a little more stagnant. We're seeing the semiconductors just have an incredible day. So I talked about unusual option activity. Here it is. The triple Qs, the NASDAQ right there, right in front of you. So that one's pretty interesting, a pretty decent sized trade, 18,000 of the February 329 calls. The problem here is, if you want to call it a problem, the premium you've got to pay is going to be there. You're buying a month out, you're going to February, and these are the 329 calls. They're out of the money, but you're going to be paying about $4 to $7. That was what we saw of the 18,000 that were bought. Stock was trading, or ETF was trading, just under 317 at the time. So some pretty aggressive buying there. It's pretty interesting to see that. I think that's worth highlighting. And I think if you can find, and I'm going to be looking to see what I think is the best correlation to the triple Qs right now to be able to position, then I might do some of that. Might be Apple, might be something in that category, but I'm going to take a little look and see what is correlating best right now, because that can shift around a little bit. And whatever that is, I'll probably more position there rather than putting on a position in the triple Q. But some big option activity there. And we've seen some huge trading across the board in so many different areas, not just ETFs. We're talking about some of the names out there too. Freeport-McMoRan's been one of those names where the size and the rolling that we've seen out of that, as well as in some of the other names, just continues to be the case. So I got to run. Unfortunately, no Q&A today. Sorry about that, guys. I got to get ready for the halftime report that we've got coming up. So I'll see you at noon Eastern time, and have a great weekend if you're not able to watch that, and look forward to seeing you next week.